And I remember the incident about the 1939 Buick that Dad loaned me to take a group of neighbor boys and myself to the ball game in Cleveland. Coming back from Cleveland, we heard a god awful noise in the engine and stopped at the gas station to find out what was wrong with the car. The gas station guy at that time, they doubled as mechanics. They pumped gas and they were mechanics too. And he said, "You've thrown a rod in that car." And he said, "The only way you're going to get that home is," he said, get set a certain speed, like 20, 25 miles an hour. Don't go any faster. Don't go any slower. Don't put any pressure on the gas pedal at all." And he said, "You might make it home." So that's what I did, and pulled the thing into the driveway and shut it off, and went to bed. Well, the next morning, Dad came out to get in the car to go to work, and he started the thing up, and of course the first thing he did was gun the engine. When he gunned the engine, the motor exploded. There was motor parts laying in the driveway. And he came in and talked to me and said, "What about this?" And I said, "Well, I did notice a strange noise in the engine on the way home, but I didn't think it was important." So then he took that car and I don't know if he traded it or junked it or what he did with it, but he bought a brand new 46 Nash after that. It was happening in late 46, maybe. He bought 46 Nash and brought it home. Occasionally, he would loan it to me with the understanding that I had to have it home by midnight or 12:30 or something like that, which I always did. I'd get the car home at midnight, and I'd throw the keys on the kitchen table so he'd have it in the morning to go to work, and then I'd go up and go to bed up in the attic. Well, unbeknownst to me, as soon as I threw those keys on the table and went to bed, Brother Tony, that was about 14 years old and had no driver's license, would sneak down and grab those keys and take the car and go with it. And he'd be gone with it all night long. Well, Dad'd get up to go to work in the morning, and there'd be no snow on the car. The motor was still warm, and he'd accuse me of having the car out all night. He said, I told you had to be home at midnight. Obviously you weren't home at midnight. Yes, I was. No, you weren't. And we went round and round about that until we found out what was really happening. I don't know how I think the way we found out is that Tony didn't make it home one morning when Dad was ready to leave for work. He was late or something, and the car pulled in. That's the only way we found that out. What was really happening. When we moved into Hall Street, there was a full 2-story barn in the back of the house. And somebody had told me that it used to be the fairgrounds, and that's why the barn was there. They held animals in there, or whatever. Anyway, there was a full 2-story barn back there. Naturally, it was all broke down, in bad shape, dry rotted, everything. It was not safe to play in, but we played it in anyway. So finally, Dad decided it was not safe, too much of a problem. We had to tear it down. So we got myself and several friends of mine from the neighborhood, and tied a rope around one of the corner posts and pulled on that rope and pulled that barn down. That's how good a shape it was in. We pulled it down with a rope. And also at Hall Street, we cut 2 holes in the floor of the basement, in the concrete floor of the basement, and put pegs, or what do you want to call them, pegs, posts, something in there, so that the adults could play quoits down there. Quoits was the indoor version of horseshoes, and it was played with circles of rope wrapped with friction tape. And Uncle Ted and Bob and Pete used to come over and play with Dad, and they were actually playing horseshoes in the basement, but they called it quoits. And I guess those holes are still in the floor today.
Okay.
Okay, I remember we used to go out to Pop's Riding Academy on Merriam Road Extension. And Pop raised hay to feed his horses. He did all his farming with horses. Had a mowing machine pulled by horses, a rake pulled by horses. We'd take the hay and throw it up on top of the hay wagon, had somebody up there tramping it down, packing it in. Even loaded it in the barn with horses. In fact, he had a Dodge out there that was supposed to be 85 horsepower. Couldn't lift the hay rake, but we had 2 horses on it, pulled it right up, took it into the barn. So anyway, I managed to scrape up enough money and do enough labor that I bought this horse. Well, buying the horse was one thing, but it cost $1 a day to board the horse. And in no way I could come up with $1 a day to board the horse. So the board now was taking the horse back away from me. So I went to Dad and said, what am I going to do? I paid this money for this horse, now I'm losing it because I can't pay the board. So he got a hold of Alex Russell. And Alex wrote a letter to Pop telling him that he couldn't make a deal like this with a juvenile. It was illegal and whatever. He had to give me my money back. So I got my money back for the horse.
My dad was born in 1910, just after Teddy Roosevelt had been president. In a decade of when 6 million immigrants came into the United States. And Puyi was 5 years old and had been on the throne of China for about 2 years. And I mention this because I believe my father is a product of his time. He spans nearly 100 years, and it's important to understand who he is by when he was born and when he grew up. In 1912, Dad would be 2, the Titanic went down. Woodrow Wilson was president. The world climate was one of anarchist terrorism, not unlike we have today. Heads of state were assassinated, and we saw the beginning of organized labor movements. In 1914, we had World War I. In 1919, the Easter Uprising in Ireland. Harding was president during Dad's lifetime. Coolidge was president. In 1920, Dad was 10. They passed Prohibition, and women got the vote. Mussolini and Hitler came to power in 1922-23. The Scopes trial was in 25. The Dust Bowl was in the 1930s. And, of course, the Great Depression. I think my father was married at 19. Mom told me that they only had a kitchen table to their name. That was the only belonging to set up housekeeping. Anyway, Dad was very active in local labor unions at Firestone, and he worked there from a position as a laborer all the way up to becoming a compounder chemist. I remember at home that he subscribed to the Catholic Worker. It was sort of a socialistic newspaper, but Dad was very politically opinionated and an isolationist. He listened regularly to Father Coughlin on the radio. I remember one of Dad's friends, Tom Craven, used to come to the house and they'd have a lot of discussions. Now Tom was an immigrant from Ireland, and I understand that he could not go back to Ireland because there was a price on his head. In the early days of our life, there were frequent strikes at Firestone, and Dad tells us that he lost the house on Grace Avenue because of a strike. He wasn't able to meet the mortgage payments. I remember during the Second World War, we packed boxes and sent them to Ireland, and in those boxes we put cocoa and soap, and we packed shoes, but the shoes couldn't be new, so they scuffed up the soles of new shoes to make them look like they'd been worn. When Mom was in the hospital having other babies, Dad was our cook, and he always cooked something exotic that usually we didn't want to eat it. And I can remember him brushing our hair and literally raising us off of our feet. He pulled on the brush so hard. He really wasn't very involved as a parent. He was basically the disciplinarian in our house. He did work, and sometimes worked 2 jobs. But he always played his poker on Friday night and golf on Saturday. When he had vacation time from Firestone, there were usually chores planned like painting or hanging the storm windows. Dad managed all the money, and he said it was him and not FDR that invented deficit spending. Mom used to get upset with Dad because the milkman would ask her, could she please make a payment, and his pay depended on his commissions. So Dad would run the bill up into the 90s, which was a lot of money in those days, and he used to say the milkman made out like a bandit when he paid him. Dad usually drove a good car. I remember learning to drive in the old Nash Rambler. One of the things he did with us on an annual basis was he took us to view the Christmas lights in the city of Akron. He took us once or twice in the summer to swim at Virginia Kendall Park, where he would tow the little ones on his back. But he quit that outing when blacks began to use the pool there, or the lake there. He drove a carpool to Firestone. And he took me along to St. Mary's to high school, but he sometimes forgot to let me off. He did help me to keep my children when I went through a divorce by renting the family house to me. And he and Mom moved to a rented home on Crosby Street then. Dad was a good dancer, but he was a bit of a show-off about it. He was not what I'd call a sensitive guy. He never spoke of his feelings. He has a philosophy, he holds it to this day, that it's always mind over matter, that you can control pain, you can control stress, and he did not appear to empathize or sympathize. He usually was ultra-logical, and when he was asked for advice, he would offer several sides of the situation, often going on for quite a long time. But he always left the decision up to you. I love my father. I'm very grateful for all he has done for me, and I only wish he is as happy to have me as his child.
Dad taught us a lot of lessons when we were growing up, and some of them have stayed with us, I think. We were taught to be cooperative and uncomplaining, and those are pretty good things to be taught. In a big family, there really wasn't room for prima donnas, and I don't think any of us grew up to be prima donnas. Dad wanted us to be, to strive for excellence, in school and other things, and that was a very good lesson too. Dad taught me something on a practical level that I've made very good use of, and that's how to change a baby's diaper. Dad exhibited a lot of patience when we were taking music lessons. For that alone, he deserves a very high place in heaven. He listened to a tune called From a Wigwam probably at least 5,000 times and maintained his sanity. So that was quite an achievement. Our dad's a special guy. One talent he has that may not have been passed on to the younger generation is for finding four-leaf clovers. I've never known how he does it, but he can spot a patch of four-leaf clovers. I used to think, oh, he just memorized the places where they grew, but that's not true. He can go to a place he's never been before and find the four-leaf clovers. So if this talent is genetic, I'd love to know who in the younger generation has inherited it. It certainly was not me.
I feel very blessed in my parents, brothers and sisters. Mom had a wonderful vocabulary and a great sense of humor. Dad could expound at length on any subject and was often responsible for my getting an excellent grade on an assignment. I remember going to Dad for help in what I thought was serious trouble because he could meet any situation with a level head. Mom, on the other hand, was very emotional, and she would usually turn the hard stuff over to Dad. On one Father's Day, I bought a box of candy for Dad. I think I was about 8 years old, and I had saved up quarters from babysitting. I was so excited, and as Mother always said, impulsive. I ran down the street with that box of candy to show someone. I think it was Mariah Nichols. Well, I fell down and the candy went all over the street. So much for that gift and that Father's Day. Now I can go to any of my brothers and sisters who are experts in many fields. And I think that we were all somehow refined in the fire of a noble, struggling, large Catholic family. And in that regard, I think it has made us all experts in some field.
Here we are at 104 Hall Street, and I'll try to stick to the time limit, but it won't be easy since I did inherit the lecturing gene. Judy and I used to share a bedroom in the old house, and at bedtime we would talk and laugh and carry on, and Dad would call up the steps, "Can the racket." Well, one thing we liked to do was to wrap a pillow around our stomachs and play Mama Caruso and Florenz. The scenario was always pretty much the same. Mama and Florenz had to go downtown on the bus, and always one of them got stuck in the bus door. So we'd be pushing and shoving and laughing, and sometimes we would hear Dad actually coming up the steps. Whoever heard him first would say, "Fake sleep." And we'd dive into the pillows, pull up the covers, and start snoring loudly. Dad would peek in the door and grumble, "Well, it can't be those two, they're asleep." Then we had to stifle uproarious laughter into the pillows, believing that we had tricked Dad once again.
Hello, Dad. You know, I always thought it was more like my mother than like you, but I don't think so anymore. It's been a long time, but I finally realized that you've bequeathed me some good gifts and some torments. In my junior year, I was called to the office by Sister Loretta, the principal. She wanted to meet the girl who beat out all the boys in the engineering aspects, the spatial relations of the junior achievement tests. She told me I was first in the diocese. I wonder who I got that analytical mind from. The downside of analytical, you know, is over-analyzing, depression, and those kind of difficulties. But over and all, you bequeathed me with some good genetic traits. I don't know how many people I've been able to take a minute and help. When I was about 8 or 9, I was walking to Mass in snow white gloves and a pretty little dress, and a little child had knocked the chain off the bicycle. Well, I had to stop and put it on and take the wrenches and tighten the rear wheel and send them on their way. Well, got some greasy gloves, but I sure felt good to have the skill to do something for someone, and also to see that little kid riding down the street with the biggest smile on their face. Well, it's many, many things you taught me I've been able to help and pass on. As you know, Bill is a mechanical engineer. I want to thank you for taking the time when I was a kid to let me be your sidekick and your gopher and help you build the back room and the lavatory on the downstairs kitchen, and for pouring the cement steps. But I gotta pick on you for making me hold up the heavy bathtub while you put the tiles underneath. I was just little and I thought it was so heavy, and I prayed and prayed for the strength to hold it up so it wouldn't fall on your hands. You know, Dad, I'm so much like you, I can't believe it. And I hope at times you've seen that I'm like my mother too, because I dearly, dearly love her. I hope you're getting well down in Florida, and I send you all my love, and I wish you the very, very best. Judy.
Okay. I remember when I learned to play golf at Brandywine, and I learned on the course. I had never played golf before, but Bobby and Dad were pros. And we had a bet that the guy that got the worst score had to buy a pitcher of beer for everybody, but he didn't get to drink out of it. And I lost every week. And I don't think that was very fair. When I hit the ball on the 9th hole into the lake, Bobby and Daddy laughed. They thought that was real funny. I didn't think that was real funny. I also remember bouncing the ball off the steps at Hall Street and catching the ball and announcing like, "It's a home run!" And the neighbors thought I was practicing to be an announcer for baseball. And I remember always being cold at Hall Street, but I have some good memories too, of course. And I remember my mother too.
One night I was practically on my way to bed, and I remembered, oh no, I had to have the names of all the presidential cabinet members for school the next day. There's no way I could find this information out. This was pre-computer, pre-internet, and so I left a note for my dad. Could he remember, or did he know the names of the cabinet members? And sure enough, I get up in the morning and he had a whole list on the kitchen table of all the cabinet members, their positions and their names. Now I wonder how many people today could name the current cabinet members. It was quite amazing. Then another time I had a quite a difficult math problem, and it involved a tall tree and a shadow of the tree and trying to figure out the angle of the triangle, and I couldn't figure out the problem. So my dad not only helped me work the problem, he explained it to me. And my memory is that I was the only one in the class that had the correct answer. Now that might not be right, but that's my memory of it. I remember him helping me solve that problem. And another thing, my dad always had a great legal mind, and many of us in the family would have stories of how he helped us with in regard to attorneys. And I had an attorney problem where I had an agreed upon fee for legal services, and after the services were rendered, I got this bill I was not expecting, and it was like double what we had agreed upon. I was very, very upset and didn't know what to do, and my dad wrote a letter which I copied and signed and sent to the attorney saying, you know, if you can explain the reason for these additional costs and enumerate your additional work that resulted in these additional costs. And so the end result was the attorney couldn't, and he then told me, I got a letter back from him, and it said, well, it's on your conscience to not pay this bill. And my dad laughed, and he said, well, in other words, he can't substantiate the bill. So he saved me a lot of money in that case. Another thing that's one of my happiest memories, many, many times, especially at the Hibernian Club, we'd be at a big dance, and as soon as the polka music started, my dad and I'd start looking for each other. I loved to polka with my dad. Well, I think it's about time for me to move over to the piano and just give my parting memory. I think my dad will remember this song, and one of the greatest gifts my dad gave me was music lessons, and music has been an enormous part of my life, and I thank him every day of my life that he gave me the chance, the opportunity to learn music. And I think all of us had music, piano, violin, trumpet, whatever. I think everyone in our family had some kind of music lessons. I stuck with it a lot longer than anybody else, but one of the memories we all have is the following piece. And this is the hard part, because that was your first sharp. Hi, this is Annie. I thought about 6 little stories that I'd like to tell about my personal experiences or moments with Dad. The earliest one that I can remember, I think I was about 4 years old, and Mom must have been sick because Dad lined up Maggie and I to comb our hair. Well, we had long, tangly hair, and he combed it all forward, covered up our faces, and we didn't like that. We kept blowing it like that to get it out of our face, and he kept saying he was trying to make a part. I said, that's not the way Mommy does it. And he said, well, that's the way Daddy does it. So we just kept combing our hair that way until we got all the tangles out and got a good part in it. I guess that's the way guys do it. When I was around 8, I remember joining the swim team, and he always encouraged me to do my best and do whatever I could accomplish. So I was in my first swim meet, and I was given the backstroke event, and I kept getting tangled up in the lane lines.
By the time I got to the end of the race, everybody else was out of the pool, fully dressed, and probably halfway home. Dad said, "I'm so proud of you. You didn't quit." And I looked up at him and said, "You mean I could have quit?" As we got older, we were afraid of getting in trouble and being punished, being threatened with being punished. Well, I scratched Mom's little Aqua Rambler car. Well, Dad said, "I understand a small scratch, but why is there a big scratch?" And that's all he said. When I entered college, I went to Akron U, and Pat was already there, and he was a big shot on their swim team, and it was 1965. All they had was a men's team. They didn't have a women's team. Well, Dad actually encouraged me to try to break the gender barrier and join the men's team. I was too shy to try it. Of course, now I wish I had. As an adult, I remember going to the hospital when Dad was sick or having a surgery, and he woke up and looked at me and he said, "You didn't need to come." I said, "Well, Dad, you were always there when I was in the hospital." He just said, "Well, that's different." Overall in our lives, Dad was not very demonstrative about his feelings. He didn't hug us a lot, say "I love you," but we always knew he did. But I do know that every day when he came home from work from Firestone, the first thing he would do was walk into the kitchen and kiss Mom hello. And we always watched him do that every day. Now as an adult, when I say "I love you, Dad," he says, "Yeah, me too." Well, you know what I mean.
I think I can speak for all of my siblings when I can say thanks, Dad, for supporting me when I was unable to take care of myself, and for letting me make my own decisions, as foolish as many of them were. But I really wish I would have taken your advice on the stock market.